Hello, everyone, and welcome to another chapter of Murder in Stratton County, written by Elizabeth Spoon and Ryland Mason, narrated by me, Brian Shepard. Chapter 6, Part 2. Brian and Dugan pulled up in front of the police station, parking in adjacent spots. Deputy Marks was standing at the top of the stairs. His collar was blowing a little in the wind. "Morning, Sheriff." "Morning, Mayor," he said, looking at both of them. They ascended the stairs into the lobby and headed for Dugan's office. Dugan turned to Deputy Marks. "You look tired," he said. "Well, boss, I've been up most of the night working on getting information." "Meet me in my office and grab some coffee." "Will do." Marks hurried away towards his desk as Dugan and Brian sat in his office. The sheriff closed the door behind them. 3 manila folders were on Dugan's desk, the front stamped urgent. Dugan opened the folder on top. It was the official report from the fire chief, Billy Hudson. He scanned the papers and then looked up at Brian. "What? What is it?" Brian asked with concern. "Sorry, my friend." Dugan reached across the desk, handing him the papers. "This doesn't look good." Brian began to read, his eyes getting wider as he read the last line on the paper. Definitive evidence points to origin and location of the fire to be the kitchen oven, left on and turned to broil, with a pan of rags stuffed inside. Accelerant used. There were a few more details, and Brian read on as the door opened and Marks stepped in. He could see the grim look on Dugan's face as Brian handed him back the paper. Dugan had the second file in his hands. Marks handed Dugan another handful of papers. "What are these?" he asked as he looked at them. Marks went on to tell them that they were the state police lab reports on the trailer park evidence that had been processed from the missing maid's trailer. Also, there was a preliminary report from the coroner. Brian looked up. "The coroner?" Brian said, confused. "Marks, could you give us a minute?" "Sure thing." He left the office, closing the door behind him. Brian just looked at Dugan. "What is going on?" Looking worried. "A body was discovered up in the pines last night in a shallow grave." The second folder was the report from Marks about the discovery, and the pending statements from Rhonda and Shep, who had not come to give them. Brian again looked at Dugan. "A body? Is it Prudence?" Dugan stood up from behind his desk. "We aren't sure yet. The body has no identification. I'm sorry to have to ask you this, Brian, but could you come downstairs with me? We need you to look and see if it is Prudence, your missing maid." Brian stood up shaking his head. "I can't believe this is all happening." The sheriff, opening the door, looked out and motioned for Marks. "Yes, sir?" "Could you get on the phone with the fire chief and see about setting up a meeting later today with us to go over the report?" "I'd like to do that, sir, but Billy and his wife left yesterday with their granddaughter to head to Florida on vacation." "Well, call him anyway. See if he could do a phone conference at some point." "I'm on it." Marks went back to his desk. The sheriff and Brian stepped into the elevator. Brian had Mark's report from the body discovery and was reading it. Dugan slid in the other folders and papers under his arm as he pushed the button for the first-floor basement. "Am I reading this correctly, Dugan? Shep Foster and Rhonda Larson?" Dugan just snickered. "Yeah, you're reading it right." "A date? What kind of a date entails the middle of nowhere and a dead body?" Brian half smiled. "Some date. Real romantic." Dugan just looked at him. "We can talk about more of that after." The elevator dinged as it made a loud thud, slowing to a stop on the basement floor. "Ready?" Brian took a deep breath. "Yes." They stepped off the elevator into a dimly lit hallway. Brian shuddered a little. Why are these places so creepy? That's such a stereotype. Dugan pushed open the door to the coroner's office. "Hello?" No one was in the office. They headed down the hallway, entering through 2 swinging doors to find the coroner. Several empty tables around the room, and his head down looking into a microscope. "Hey, Swift." "Hello, Sheriff." "Where's the body they brought in last night?" Dugan asked as he looked around the room. "Oh, right over here." Swift?" Brian said to Dugan. The coroner stood up and stuck out a glove covered in blood. Bob Swifton." Brian looked down at the hand, mortified for a second. Bob, realizing it was the mayor, quickly apologized, pulling his gloves off and retreating to a hand-washing sink to wash his hands. He turned to see Dugan and Brian just staring at him. "Sorry about that, sir." He again stuck out a freshly washed hand to Brian, who shook it. "Nice to meet you," Brian said, trying to crack a smile, considering. "It's rare I see a lot of people. Lonely life of a coroner, I guess." Brian again just looked at Dugan. "Let's get this over with," Brian said. He did not want to be there any longer than he had to be. Bob reached into a box and pulled out a fresh pair of latex gloves. Walking over to the freezer compartments at the far end of the room, he gripped the handle of the door. The paper tab on the door read, "Jane Doe." Brian gulped a little. Bob swung open the door and grabbed the handle of the roll-out gurney. A sheet draped over the corpse atop of it. Before Bob could pull the sheet back, Dugan turned to him. "What can you tell me?" Dugan asked. Bob went on to say, "Female Jane Doe, late 40s. Brian just stood staring at the body under the sheet. Dugan and Bob's voices almost droned out into silence. Brian. He turned and looked at Dugan. "Ready?" he said as he walked over to stand next to Brian. "Yes," Brian said with a heavy sigh. It's not Prudence. Nothing to worry about, he thought. Bob pulled back the sheet to reveal the face of the body. Brian looked down at the face. He quickly took a step back and turned around, biting his knuckle, a tear rolling down his cheek. "Brian," Dugan said. "Sir?" Swift said, looking at Brian. Yes, Dugan. It's her. It's Prudence," Brian said, covering his face with his hands. Dugan put a hand on Brian's shoulder. "I'm sorry, my friend. I know she worked for you for a while," he said softly. "Yes. Almost 8 years now." Dugan turned to the coroner. "How did she die?" Brian asked, even though he didn't want to know. Findings indicated blunt force trauma to the skull. She had a lot of bruising all over her body. Someone beat the crap out of her, for lack of a better term. The official cause of death was asphyxiation. She was choked to death after a brutal physical assault. Brian was shocked. Who would do this and why? Looking wide-eyed and just in total shock. I'm not sure what other word to use. This can't be happening, he thought. Was someone out to get him? All these questions. Bob covered the body. the wheels making a squeaking noise as the gurney retreated back into the icy depths of the freezer. He shut the door. It was silent in the room for a minute. Bob turned towards the table where the microscope was. "I've sent all the samples I could out to the lab for testing. My official report will have to wait until those come back," Swift said. Dugan thanked him. "Yes, I know. Just get that report to me as soon as it's done," Dugan said. Bob pushed open the swinging door, and they all made their way down the hallway towards the elevator. "Just call me if you have any questions." Bob turned and disappeared into his office. Dugan stood in front of the elevator, pushing the button. He then looked over at Brian. "Are you okay?" Brian just looked at him. "No, not really," Brian said, wanting out of the room. They stepped onto the elevator. As Brian looked at his watch, it was almost 9 a.m. "I better get to my office," Brian said. Dugan just turned to him. "Don't worry. We will figure out what is going on. It's just going to take some time." The elevator doors opened. Stepping inside, Dugan let Brian step into the elevator, pulling up his pants and bracing his gun in the holster with his left hand. Dugan punched the button for the first floor. The doors closed, making a swift sound. Who had killed Prudence? What kind of animal would brutalize another human being so violently? Why was she silenced? Did she know something that got her killed? So many questions, Brian thought, as the elevator climbed. The doors slid open, and Brian and Dugan stepped back out into the hallway. Brian turned to Dugan, a definite look of distress on his face. "I'm heading to my office," Brian said, looking around as if he was momentarily lost. Yes, that's the word I have been looking for. Lost. Dugan tapped him on the back. "Try not to worry, old friend. We will figure out the facts," he said, looking into Brian's eyes. Brian exited out the side door, heading for his office in City Hall. Dugan leaned against the wall for a minute. He could hear the television from the lobby. Weather alert. Cold front moving in. Huge winter storm due to hit the area. Take precautions now. Great, Dugan thought. All this going on, and now we get hit with a storm. This can't get any worse. Little did he know, it was about to get much worse. Deputy Marks came around the corner. "Oh, here you are, Sheriff. We have a problem." "What is it, Marks?" They headed down the hallway together, Marks fiddling with a handful of paperwork in his hands. "Well?" "I went back out to the Wainwright place just to do some follow-up. Her car is gone," he said, as if he was surprised by just saying it. Dugan just looked at him. "Are you serious?" "Yeah, I am. I checked to make sure it wasn't towed or anything like that. It's been stolen." "Well, put a call out for it." "Already did, sir." "We have to get to the bottom of all of this as soon as possible. Things just don't add up." Dugan sat down at his desk and picked up the phone. He dialed Dennis Malloy again. Marks disappeared into the employee lounge. "Hello, Malloy's office." "Can I speak to Dennis, please? Tell him it's Dugan calling." "I'm sorry, but he's already left to head to Stratton. I'm sure he'll be there soon, sir," the secretary said. "Oh, thank you." Dugan hung up, tapping his fingers on the desk. Marks emerged from the employees' lounge and went into the copy room. Shortly after, sliding copies of his reports across the desk. Here you go, boss. Here's your coffee. Dugan sat down, placing the manila folders in front of him. He's got some work to do. Dugan sat reading over all the reports, trying to piece together all the evidence in his head. He had his work cut out for him. Deputy Marks disappearing out the side door to track down any leads on the now missing car of the maid, now laying in the morgue. Meanwhile, down at the market, Alice and Shep were just finishing up the day. Shep turned to Alice. "Hey, I've got something I gotta take care of. Do you mind if I leave?" he asked. "No, not at all. I'm just curious where Bucky is. He's usually here by now." Shep looked at the clock. It was almost 2 o'clock in the afternoon. "I can swing back if you want when I'm done." "That's fine, Shep. What is it you got to do anyway?" Shep hesitated, not wanting to reveal too much about his botched romantic endeavor with Rhonda. "I just have to talk to Marks this afternoon." Alice just looked at him with curiosity. "What? Okay." "Me and Rhonda found a foot. Or a body up in the pines last night." "Oh my God, Shep. For real?" Alice looked at him and could tell that this was one thing that he was being serious about. "Wow. Please don't say anything to anyone. It's embarrassing enough, remembering how it all went down." "I won't." "Get going." Alice waved him out of the kitchen. "I'll wait for Bucky. Hopefully he's just running late." Shep pulled his keys out of his pocket and headed down the sidewalk to go fetch Rhonda from the bank. She was already waiting outside to get picked up and go give her statement at the station. Alice sat on the stool behind the register, watching out the window. The wind was picking up a lot, and the clouds were moving in. She clicked on the radio behind her, turning it to an AM station. Another weather alert for the area was just coming over the radio. Alice stood up. Snow, and lots of it. Strong winter storm to blanket the area. Great, Alice thought. Better check the inventory. She grabbed her clipboard from her office desk and started making the rounds, checking off things she needed to order, batteries and such. The chimes on the door jingled. It was the real estate agent. "Hello?" she yelled out. Alice emerged from one of the aisles. "Yes?" "Oh, hi. I sold it. Do you have any wine?" she said excitedly. "Yeah." Alice pointed her in the direction of the wine rack. "So you sold it to that family from the city?" Alice asked. "Yes, what a nice family," Gemma said, grabbing a bottle. Alice rang her out while she went on about the sale, and that she had another meeting while in town with a doctor who just bought the Jones place. "You know we're having a storm coming, right?" Alice just looked at her. The realtor looked undeterred from this news. "I can just stay in town then. No worries." She pulled another business card from her pocket, handing it to Alice. "Gemma Mint. So you don't forget." She chuckled as she scooped up her bag of wine and goodies and headed out across the street to secure a room with the Brentleys before driving out to the Jones place. Alice watched her disappear into the lobby of the bed and breakfast. What an exuberant woman, Alice thought to herself. Now, where the hell was Bucky? Alice grabbed the phone, dialing the barber shop down the street. "Hello, Thompson Barber Shop, Jeb speaking." "Hey, Jeb, it's Alice. Bucky isn't there by chance, is he? No, I've been trying to reach him myself. He didn't show up for work? Not yet. Alice tapped her fingers on the counter as Jeb explained that the Victor place, which Gemma Mint had just sold to the Bensons, was owned by his parents, and Bucky had been staying in the house prior to it going on the market. Jeb went on to say that Bucky got angry with him for selling the house and that he had no other place to go. He reportedly told people around town that the house was haunted, so no one would be interested in it. I gotta find him, Alice. I told him he could stay with me till the sale went through and he got his half. I think he thinks I'm gonna cheat him or something. We both know he isn't altogether from the drug abuse. I know, Alice said. If you do hear from him, please have him call me immediately. I will, and likewise. Jeb hung up the phone. Alice heard it click as she hung up her end as well. Something felt wrong. Something was going on. She could feel it in her gut. She looked up at the clock. It was almost 3:30 now. Alice headed for the back of the kitchen when the phone rang. She grabbed it and answered. Hello? Hello? Marketplace. Hey, Al. It was Shep calling from the police station. We're all done here. Any sign of Bucky? He wondered. No, nothing, she said, worried. I'm coming to close the store for you. That's nice of you, Shep. Yeah, date night is indefinitely postponed, so I have nothing better to do. See you soon. Alice smiled at his levity and hung up. She was worried about Bucky. He had been doing so well for her for so long. What if he got back into drugs? Did he relapse? She didn't know. Alice looked back out the window. Tiny white flakes floating on the wind and settling against the windowsill. It had begun to snow. Thanks so much, guys. I look forward to Chapter 7, and I can't wait for you to hear it.